Welcome to the Real Japan podcast. Today, we are taking a deep dive into something really fascinating about Japan. It's this massive contradiction. You've got this huge, multi-billion-dollar gambling culture, but it exists alongside some of the, well, strictest anti-gambling laws you'll find anywhere.
It really is a paradox, isn't it? You have this incredible popular demand, this huge market, but all under incredibly tight regulation. So our mission today really is to unpack how that actually works. What are the legal exceptions, the specific games, that let this whole thing thrive? We're talking everything from that pinball-like obsession, pachinko, to these really unique high-speed sports they bet on.
Yeah, we'll explore the economics, definitely the sensory experience, which sounds intense, and like the clever legal footwork involved. And you should stick with us to the end because we've got a final kind of provocative thought on what this all says about Japanese culture more broadly.
Absolutely. And look, if you find these things intriguing as we talk about them, maybe you want to actually see what a pachinko parlor looks like or how fast karaoke racing is. We've put together a really comprehensive guide. It's got videos exploring these pastimes, links to more info. You can find the link for that guide right in the description below this.
Great. Okay, so let's start with that paradox.
Right. So the basic thing to grasp is that most forms of gambling, you might think of casinos, private lotteries, betting on most sports with a private bookie, they're basically banned. The penal code is pretty clear, but the gambling culture is still enormous. So how? Well, it's sustained by a few very specific, very important legal exceptions.
Okay, so let's unpack the big one, the king of the industry, right?
Joe.
Pachinko. This makes up a huge chunk of the revenue, and it's totally unique to Japan. If you've never seen it, imagine like a vertical pinball machine, but crossed with a slot machine. You use these little silver balls instead of like spinning reels.
Yeah, they're everywhere. The number of parlors, the sheer scale, it's kind of staggering. And a really key part of the regulation is that the stakes have to be low or relatively low.
Yeah.
The idea is to stop people getting into massive debt, prevent huge gambling problems. So you put your money in, get balls, and winnings just get you more balls or maybe access to bonus features within the game.
Okay, but here's where it gets like really interesting and where we need to do the deep dive. Because everyone says, oh, they give out prizes, not cash. But that doesn't really explain how the money actually flows, does it? Because Japanese law absolutely forbids giving cash prizes directly at the parlor.
Exactly. That's the absolute crux of it. And it leads to this incredibly clever, slightly convoluted workaround. Sometimes people call it the three-token system or TUC. This is the core of the whole paradox. When you win enough balls, you go to a counter inside the parlor and you exchange them. Not for cash, but for specific physical tokens. These are often small, kind of meaningless items in themselves, maybe little plastic squares with gold foil, something like that. They're called special prize tokens.
Okay, so the parlor itself has followed the law. No cash payout. But then what? What does the winner do with this little plastic thing?
Well, this is the tolerated gray area.
Yeah.
The winner takes that token, which, again, has no real value on its own, leaves the parlor, and walks, maybe just a few feet, maybe next door, to a totally separate little booth or window. This is the TUC exchange point or buyback place. And it's crucial that it's legally and physically separate from the pachinko parlor itself.
And there at that separate location, they swap the token for actual cash?
Precisely. And then that little exchange point sells the token back, usually through another company, to the pachinko parlor to be used again. You see the genius of it. The gambling act. Winning balls, getting a token happens in one place. The cash transaction happens somewhere else, legally distinct. The government kind of turns a blind eye to the connection, allowing this massive economic activity while technically upholding the no cash prizes rule.
It's masterful.
In a way.
Yeah. That is a really key distinction to understand the whole system. Okay, but let's shift gears to the actual experience. You read about these parlors being just an assault on the senses, deafening noise, flashing lights everywhere. Yet you also hear that locals describe getting into this almost meditative Zen-like state while playing. How does total chaos equal Zen? That sounds completely backwards.
It does sound counterintuitive, doesn't it? But think about the context of Japanese work culture. Often very high pressure, very demanding, highly socialized. The noise and lights, they aren't relaxing like, say, listening to gentle music. It's more like sensory overload. It drowns everything else out. Your own thoughts, the worries from work, the outside world, it all gets pushed aside because your senses are just completely saturated. It creates this intense focus, almost tunnel vision.
Right. So it's less relaxing and more high-intensity escapism. You're just blocking everything else out and focusing intently on this one thing.
Exactly that. It's a structured way to release stress. You're focused on this repetitive mechanical action, launching the balls, watching them fall. For that period, the outside world just disappears.
Hmm.
Honestly, even if you have zero interest in playing, you should try visiting a big parlor if you're in Japan,
Yeah,
just for the cultural experience. But definitely bring your plugs.
good tip. Okay, so beyond the hypnotic chaos of pachinko, there's this other huge side. Betting on specific regulated sports. We hear it's a really popular pastime for like working men and women after hours. Hitting the bookies is just part of the routine for many.
Yeah, and the reason these specific sports are legal where others aren't comes back to that same idea of control and public benefit. These are government-controlled betting systems. The revenue is heavily taxed, and that money is specifically earmarked. It goes into the public treasury, funds local projects, or supports the actual sports industries themselves. That's the justification.
Gotcha. So which sports are we talking about? Horse racing seems like a huge one.
Oh, it's massive. Probably the biggest single sport for betting. In 2019, the revenue was something like $27 billion. That's enormous, globally speaking.
Wow. And is it like, the sport of kings vibe you get in some other countries? Fancy hats and champagne?
Not really, no. It's much more down to earth in Japan. The focus is really squarely on the betting itself. Studying the form guides, analyzing the horses, placing the bets. That's the main event. Less about the social scene, more about the mechanics of trying to win.
That focus sounds intense. I read you can even take classes specifically on how to bet on horse races better.
You absolutely can. There are schools and seminars dedicated to it. That tells you just how seriously people take the analytical side of it, trying to find an edge.
Okay, so horse racing is big. What about the more uniquely Japanese betting sports?
Right. Well, you have Keirin. This is Japanese bicycle racing, but with very specific rules and tactics. It's got a really dedicated following for betting, even though there aren't actually that many dedicated velodromes compared to the betting volume.
What makes Keirin unique as a race?
Well, the key thing is the start. The riders follow behind a pacer vehicle called a derny for the first few laps. The pacer sets the speed and keeps everything bunched up. Then, with maybe 2 or 3 laps to go, the pacer pulls off the track and it just explodes into this incredibly fast, tactical sprint to the finish. Betting involves predicting who makes what move, who works with whom, right before that final burst.
Interesting. And it's evolving too, right?
Yes, it was traditionally all male, but female racers have started competing in recent years, which has brought in new fans and different betting dynamics. And like pachinko in a way, Keirin has actually started to spread. South Korea now has its own Keirin races and velodromes.
Okay, Keirin sounds intense. Then there's something even more extreme.
Yeah, you can say that. Kyoutei. Powerboat racing. This is really high-octane stuff. You have 6 small, very fast boats racing around a short 300-meter course marked by just 2 buoys.
Powerboats on a tiny course sounds dangerous and thrilling.
It absolutely is. High speed, tight turns. What's also really notable about Kyoutei, though, is the equality aspect. From the very beginning of this sport, men and women have competed together on the same teams in the same races. They train together, they race against each other, and bettors wager on them equally. That's quite unusual compared to many global sports.
That's really interesting. And this is also gaining traction elsewhere.
Yeah, like Kyoutei's starting to pick up fans, and potentially events in South Korea, too. And then finally, in the regulated sports category, you have Toto, which is basically soccer betting. Sports Shinkokuji is the official name. Punters can bet on match outcomes, win, lose, draw, or the exact score.
Right, and Toto kind of bridges the old and new ways, doesn't it? Because you can buy tickets online or in physical shops.
Exactly. It points toward the digital shift.
Hmm.
And just a quick reminder here, if hearing about Keirin sprints or Kyoutei powerboats makes you want to actually see what they look like, do check out the guide on therealjapan.com. We've got videos linked there.
Okay, so we have these very specific regulated systems, pachinko, with its loophole, these government-run sports bets. But you mentioned the digital shift with Toto. What about the wider world of online gambling? How does that fit into this tightly controlled picture? Because you hear about online casinos growing, even though they seem to operate in this kind of legal gray area.
That's exactly the term, gray area.
Yeah.
Because the websites, the servers for these online casinos and betting platforms, they're almost always based outside Japan, offshore.
Yeah.
So they're not directly under Japanese law or jurisdiction, and players are definitely drawn to them. Why? Why? Often bigger bonuses, maybe better odds, potentially higher payouts than the regulated games offer.
Right. So if the government kind of tolerates the pachinko workaround to manage things and get tax revenue, why is online seen as more problematic?
Well, because it completely bypasses that entire structure.
Right.
The money flows out of the country. The government doesn't get the tax revenue from it.
Right.
And crucially, there's none of that built-in risk management that, theoretically at least, exists with low-stakes pachinko or regulated betting. It's much harder to control or even monitor. Enforcement is incredibly difficult when all someone needs is a smartphone and maybe a way to mask their location. There are even websites out there specifically reviewing and recommending online casinos for Japanese players, which just shows you the scale of this unregulated side.
So it's clear that games of chance, betting, it has a really significant and deep-rooted place in Japanese culture, whether it's these unique native games or adaptations of global things like soccer betting.
Definitely. And if you kind of step back and look at the bigger picture, the fact that this huge gambling culture persists despite such strict laws, it tells you something quite interesting about Japanese society, I think.
Yeah.
It functions as this incredibly popular, almost essential pastime. It's a structured, culturally sort of sanctioned way for people, especially working people, to de-stress, find some entertainment, but all within these very tightly defined rules, these cultural and legal boundaries. Japan puts a huge emphasis on structure and control, right?
Yeah.
And it seems even its vices or leisure activities reflect that. They're meticulously managed, at least the legal ones.
Yeah, that's a great point. Which leads us to that final thought we promised. Considering those really strict regulations and how they try to control everything, the sheer enduring popularity of specifically Japanese activities like pachinko, Keirin, and Kyoutei, it really shows that even when Japan borrows a global concept like betting or maybe even slot machines, it very quickly adapts it, molds it, makes it distinctly Japanese. It integrates it into its own unique cultural and, importantly, financial framework. They make it their own.
That's a perfect way to put it. So yeah, that's been our deep dive into Japan's really complex betting world, from the sensory overload of pachinko parlors to the speed of Kyoutei. And remember, you can find that complete guide with all the videos and extra resources we mentioned over at therealjapan.com, or just click the link right there in the description.
Great stuff. Well, thank you for joining us for this exploration of these really unique Japanese pastimes. It's definitely a contradiction worth understanding. And hey, if listening to this has maybe made you think about experiencing some of this firsthand, maybe you want to brave a pachinko parlor, or perhaps try your luck betting on Keirin and you'd like some expert help planning your whole trip to Japan. You should definitely check out Rob's award-winning Japan travel planning services. We've put the link for that in the description as well.
Thanks for tuning in. Farewell.
Until next time.